Walking Man's Road. Walking Man's Road.
Hey there, Tarynn here for Tarynn Reads. Good morning, everyone. Now we're into our second session with A Man of His Word's first book, Magic Casement. But before we do that, we're going to try something a little different today. We're going off on our own tangential journey for a while before we rejoin Enos and Rap on theirs. So please bear with me and stick around. I promise this will all make sense when I'm finished. And we're going to go into some actual literary terms. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I want you all to understand how I look at the world and how I look at writing. Because once you see what I look at, you're never going to view books, movies, or videos the same way ever again, not even your own life. Now, this was started by a man named Joseph Campbell, who is a mythologist. He studied myths for many, many years. He came out with a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and later he also did a series of discussions with Bill Moyers, and that was all included in the book The Power of Myth. He found that most myths and all the best stories all have a very similar framework. If it's a really good story, it's kind of like life, and life is made up of many different smaller journeys. Books and stories are the same way. They're made up with smaller stories that all mesh together into a larger, overreaching story for the whole work. He came up with what's known as the hero's journey, of course. Real original, but it works. And as you can see here from this chart, it's kind of complicated when you really want to get into it. But when you look at it, it really does work, and all the best stories really do follow this. I always look for these things when I'm sitting in a movie theater, or when I'm reading a story, or listening to one on audiobook, or playing a video game. Those have to follow the same framework as well. I look for the hero. I look for the call to adventure. I look for the refusal of the call, and the obstacles, crossing thresholds, and the final return. Then the hero getting used to the world once he's back and settling in and realizing how his perspective has changed as he's changed on the journey, or she. I look for all these things almost like you're looking for a familiar friend. It's comforting to find these things, especially when you know what to look for. And it may be formulaic, but it's there for a reason. There's a reason it has lasted this long, and why authors and playwrights and story writers still, to this day, look to Campbell's work and consider it the standard as to how to put a good story together. It's not just a great way to look at a story or look at frameworks of how to write a story even. It's a great way of looking at the world around you. You want to consider life an adventure? It can be. You can be the hero of your own story, and this is how you do it. So I really look to Campbell's work when I'm reading or writing, and I truly appreciate the work he did. It's just an amazing, amazing way to think of literature. But I'm not going to go into it any further than that. I recommend Crash Course Mythology. They had a very good episode all about the hero's journey. I'll put the link below, and I highly recommend you watch it. It is incredible the way they delve into it, and Crash Course explains it very simply. But this has already gone on way too long, and we need to get on to the book. Let's see, where were we? Ah, yes. Enos, the princess, was coming home with some horribly expensive silk, and she met her old friend Rap on the way in. What do you think you're doing standing here with that stupid pike? I'm guarding the palace. Enos snorted before she remembered again that snorting was not regal. For what? Dragons? Sorcerers? Imperial legions? He was growing very angry now. She was pleased to see, but he made a great effort to answer civilly. I challenge strangers. Tommy rot! She suppressed another snort, and there, as if sent by the gods, a stranger came strolling across the yard toward the gate. Right, Enos said. Challenge this one. Rap bit his lip. He doesn't look very dangerous. Challenge. I want to see how it's done. And now you know he can't possibly put down and leave alone a dare like that. He clenched his big jaw angrily. Stand back then. As the stranger drew near, Rap swung his pike to level and took one pace with his left foot and demanded loudly, Who goes there? Fiend or foe? The young man stopped, raised his eyebrows, considered the question. You're new at this, aren't you? He asked in pleasant tenor. Rap turned very red and said nothing, waiting for an answer. Enos suppressed a snigger, letting just enough escape that Rap would know it was there. Well, I'm not a fiend. The stranger was quite young, slim, and not very tall, but a blonde Jotun nonetheless. Anyone less like a fiend Enos could not imagine. He wore a brown wool cloak with the hood back, a leather doublet, and rather baggy brown hose. She decided that his clothes were all too big for him, which made him seem shabbier than he truly was. He was fresh-faced and scrubbed and cleaned, a point of note in Krasnagar, and the sun blazed on his white gold hair. Definitely I'm not a fiend, he repeated. I'm a wandering minstrel, so I suppose I'm either a to or a fro. Yes, I must be a fro. What's your name, minstrel? Rap demanded hoarsely. My name is Jalon, but the stranger's attention had wandered toward Enos. He bowed. And I know who this is. Your humble servant, Your Highness. He had big blue eyes with a dreamy air that she found quite appealing. On impulse, she held out her hand. He took it in his long minstrel's fingers and kissed it. How romantic is that? I love courtly behavior. I saw you when you were very small, Highness. He had a charming smile. I knew then that one day you would amaze the world with your beauty, but I see that I underestimated it. Okay, that's laying it on a bit thick, isn't it, guys? He was a very nice young man. If you're a minstrel, why haven't you got a harp? Rap was still holding his pike at the challenge position. How long did you see me? Enos asked. He could not be so very many years older than she was. She could not recall any minstrel so young. Perhaps he had been an apprentice accompanying a master. He smiled vaguely at her, then turned to Rap. Harps are heavy. He pulled a pipe from a pocket in his cloak and played a trill. Do you sing, too? Rap was still suspicious. Not at the same time, Jalon said solemnly. This time the snigger escaped completely, and Rap shot Enos a murderous glare from the corner of his eye. Jalon did not seem very worried by the pike. But I do play harp, and there used to be a good one on the mantel in the hall, so I can borrow that again, I'm sure. He did not seem as if he would be worried by anything at all, and there certainly was a harp on the mantel. Wait here. Rap put his pike over his shoulder rather clumsily and swung around, stamping his boots, apparently heading for the guard room. That would not do at all. Enos did not want Sergeant Thosselin and perhaps others coming out and seeing her wandering unaccompanied, carrying home her own purchases. Rap, should you go off and leave me helpless with this dangerous stranger? Rap stopped and spun around, almost grinding his teeth. And the castle, she exclaimed. What if a patrol comes, or a griffin, and you're not here to guard us? You come with me, then. He was quite furious now. No, Enos said. I think you should take Master Jalon to the guard room with you if you think he's dangerous. You are welcome in my father's house, minstrel. That sounded very gracious and regal. The stranger smiled and bowed to her again. He strolled toward the guard room with Rap. Enos lingered for a moment and then slipped through the archway, unobserved and very satisfied. Like the town itself, the castle was all up and down, and she was soon puffing again as she hurried up the endless steps toward her chamber. Halfway there, she met old Condorall, the seneschal, picking his way carefully down an extremely dark staircase. He was very small and stooped and white-haired, with gray, withered skin and eyes so rheumy that she did not like to look at them. But quite a pleasant old relic when he didn't talk your ears numb. His memory for recent events was failing. He repeated the same old stories endlessly, yet he could remember the remote past quite well. Good day to you, Master Condorall, she said, stopping. He peered down at her for a moment, clutching the nail. And to you, Highness. He sounded surprised, as if he had expected someone much younger. Do you know a minstrel called Jalon? Enos was still bothered by her inability to recall that polite young man. Minstrels came by rarely to remote Krasnagar. Jalon, Condorall frowned and pulled his lip. Oh, why, yes, my lady, a very fine troubadour. The old man beamed. Is he come here again? He is, she said crossly. I don't remember him. Oh, no, you wouldn't. The old man shook his head. Dear me, no, it has been many years, but that is good news. We shall hear some fine singing from Master Jalon if his voice has not lost its trill. I remember how he brought tears to all our eyes when he sang The Maiden and the Dragon. He doesn't look very old, she said quickly. Not much older than me. Well, not very much. Condorall shook his head again, looking doubtful. I can recall hearing tell of him when I was young myself, my lady. This must be a son, then, or a grandson? Perhaps, she said, and dodged quickly by before he could start reminiscing. Several staircases later, she reached her summer chamber at the top of one of the shorter spires. She had taken it the previous year and loved it, although it was much too cold to use in the winter. It was circular and bright, with walls so low that the high conical ceiling swooped almost to the floor. There were 4 pointed dormer windows, and from here she could look down on all of Krasnagar. She laid her precious packet of silk on the bed and started pulling off her riding clothes and dropping them on the rug. To the north lay the winter ocean, sparkling blue now and smiling under the caress of summer. The swell broke lazily over the reefs, showing hardly any white at all, and seabirds swooped. To the west stood the castle's towers and yards, roofs and terraces, a thicket of black masonry. Southward she could see the town, falling away steeply to the harbor. Beyond that lay the beach, and then the hills, rounded and grassy. Those hills were certainly part of her father's demesne. He also claimed the moors that lay beyond the horizon, although she had seen those only rarely, when she had gone hunting with her parents. Stripped to her linen, Enos grabbed up the silk and attempted to drape it over herself as Mistress Malorn had done for her. She did not succeed very well, but the effect was still spectacular. Never had she seen so fine a fabric. She had not known that threads could be so fine, so soft, so cunningly woven, nor that it was possible to make such pictures with a loom. Gold and green and bronze, the colors shone even brighter in her room than they had in the dingy little store. And there was so much of it. She tried arranging a train and almost fell over, making the golden dragons writhe. Originally, it must have come from distant Gouache, on the shores of the spring sea, Malorn had said. A great rarity in these parts. She had bought it many years ago from a Jotun sailor, who had probably looted it in a trifling act of piracy. Or perhaps it had come over the great trade routes and had been pillaged from some unfortunate city, but it was old and very splendid, and obviously destined to display the royal beauty of the Princess Inosalan of Krasnagar. 3.5 imperials. Enos sighed to the mirror. Her father must be made to understand. Suicide was the only possible alternative. But why had she promised that the money would be sent that very day? She should have left herself more time for strategy. Yet a gown fashioned from this glory would be worn only on special occasions. She had stopped growing taller, so she would not grow out of it. She still had to grow more in other directions. She certainly hoped she had more to grow in other directions. But that could be handled with a little discreet padding that could be removed when it was no longer required. Oh my gosh, she's thinking about padding her bra. I had no idea. She wondered how much padding Aunt Cade would allow. Well, there was nothing to be gained by standing in front of the mirror. She must talk to her father. She began to fold the silk again, while pondering what to wear for the interview. Probably her dowdy brown worsted, too small now and patched. That would do very well. Now, we can easily see she is extremely sneaky here. 3. It took Enos some time to locate her father, but she was eventually informed that he was in the royal bedchamber, which was astonishing news at that time of day. It also meant more stairs, but anywhere meant more stairs in Krasnagar. The royal chamber was located at the very top of the great tower, known as Iniso's Tower, and she wound her way up the spiral stairs that ran within the walls. There were far too many levels. Throne room, presence chamber, robing room, antechamber. Pausing to catch her breath in the withdrawing room, Enos wondered, not for the first time, why in the names of all the gods her father did not move his quarters to somewhere more convenient. The withdrawing room was her favorite, though. When Aunt Kate had returned from Kinvale 2 years ago, she had brought a whole room full of furniture. Not the heavy, antique, stuffing, falling out furniture that had cluttered most of the palace, but supremely elegant gilt and rosewood with incredibly slender legs, with roses and butterflies embroidered on the cushions, and the woodwork all glossy. There was no room more gracious in all of Krasnagar. Even the rugs were works of art. While Enos would never be so disloyal to her mother's memory as to admit the fact, she loved the withdrawing room as Aunt Cade had remade it. Sufficiently recovered to move, she crossed the withdrawing room, went up more stairs, across what they now called the dressing room, but which had been her bedroom until quite recently, and finally, more slowly than she had started, up the final stair to her father's door. It was ajar, so she walked in. With very mixed feelings, she glanced over the clumsy, massive furnishings. She came here rarely now, and for the first time she saw how shabby they all were, the trappings of an aging widower who clung to old familiar things without regard to their state of wear. The crimsons had faded, the golds tarnished, colors and fabrics become dull and sad. The drapes were shabby and the rugs a disgrace. Her mother's portrait still hung over the fireplace, but it was blurred by smoke stain. Now, I cannot believe someone would let their wife's picture go that way. I would not let my husband's picture do that if he ever died before me. So we can see how shabby this is, and I think it also gives an indication of probably how lonely Enos's father has been. Many, many icy mornings Enos had cuddled into the great bed between her parents under the heaped furs of winter, and yet those memories were overlain now by a last transparent image of her mother, burning away in fever when the great sickness had come on the first ship of spring and stalked all that terrible summer through the town. Never mind that. No one was there. Furiously she pouted, glaring around as if the furniture itself was at fault. The drapes on the four-poster were pulled back, so her father was not in bed, and she could not imagine him going to bed in the middle of the day anyway. She eyed her wardrobe, but the chances that King Hollandarn of Krasnagar would hide inside a wardrobe did not seem worth crossing a room to investigate. The windows were deeply recessed, but on those also the drapes were open. There was nowhere. Uneasily, Enos turned to retrace her steps and then hesitated. A vagueness niggled at the back of her mind. She took another quick glance around, shrugged, and moved toward the stair again, and stopped again. Her scalp prickled. There was something wrong, and she couldn't place it. Well, setting her teeth firmly, she faced the room. Forcing oddly reluctant feet to move, she began to walk slowly all around the chamber, looking suspiciously at everything, in everything, and even under everything. This was her father's bedroom, and she was the princess, and there could not possibly be anything dangerous to explain this curious apprehension. The high dresser at the far side had been pulled forward away from the wall. No, that couldn't be important. Why? Why had the dresser been moved? And why had she not noticed it at once? With goosebumps crawling over her arms, she forced herself to peer around behind the errant dresser. The door there was ajar. The shivery feeling vanished, leaving a sense of disapproval. Why had Enos never known that there was a door there? She glanced up at the horizontal beams and the planked ceiling. In all the other towers, the top room had a pointed roof, as her own chamber did. So there was another room above this one. She had never realized. How very curious. Procrastination was not one of her failings. Carefully holding her precious silk away from the cobwebby back of the dresser, Enos moved to that diabolically tempting door. She saw steps, of course, as she had expected. Another flight curved around inside the wall, just like all the other stairs. These were very dusty. The tiny windows set every few paces were exactly as she would have expected, also gray, with grime and draped in cobwebs. The musty air was rank with the odor of mold. A secret room! How very interesting! Now she did hesitate, but only for a couple of seconds. Curiosity overcame caution, and even the silk was forgotten as she slipped through the narrow gap and started to climb. Quietly, though. Probably there was nothing up above here at all, and her father would welcome her just as happily as he would do anywhere else. On the other hand, it was very peculiar that she had never heard anyone ever mention this unknown room. It could not be any of her business. She was trying to be on her best behavior. She was holding a packet of silk that cost 3.5 imperials. She is much too young, said her father's voice. Enos froze against the icy stones of the wall. She was almost at the top, and obviously the door was open. The voice had echoed as if the unseen chamber were bare and unfinished. She's not as young as all that, another voice replied. You take a good look at her. She's very nearly a young lady now. Her father muttered something she did not catch. In the Empire, they would regard her as old enough already, said the other voice. Who could that be? She didn't recognize the voice, yet it must be someone who knew her, for there could be no doubt who was being discussed. But who? There's no one in the kingdom. Then Aunt Gilkey, perhaps? It was a dry, elderly voice. Or a Calcor. Those are the obvious choices. Now Enos could guess what was being discussed. She gasped and for a moment considered marching straight through the door and announcing that she had no intention of marrying either Duke and Gilkey or Thane Calcor or anyone else for that matter, so there. Only the packet of silk stopped her. No, 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 her father said loudly, and Enos relaxed a fraction. Either of those two and the other would start a war. Or I shall, she thought. An infuriating silence followed, one of those pauses when meanings pass without words, in smiles or nods or shrugs, and the speakers are not even aware that they have stopped speaking. But eavesdroppers are. It was not regal. It was not even polite to eavesdrop. Enos knew that, but she told herself firmly that it was also not polite to talk about someone when they were not there, either. So she was perfectly entitled to listen to I never met Calcor. That was her father again, further away. You can live without the experience, my friend. Friend? She knew of no one who addressed the king that way. Bad? Rough, the stranger chuckled quietly. Typical Jotun. Winter-long drinking parties, probably wrestles she-bears for exercises, sharkskin underwear, I wouldn't wonder. That's out, then. Enos certainly agreed with her father on that. And Gilkey's too old for her, though, he said. He will have to be a neutral, but you're right about Kinvale. Next year, perhaps. The stranger spoke quite softly, so that she had to strain to hear. You may not have that much time, my friend. Then another pause, but not so long. I see, her father's voice, curiously flat and emotionless. I'm sorry. Hardly your fault, the king sighed. It was why I sent for you, your skill and your honesty and wisdom, and I knew you would not hold back the truth. Another pause. Are you sure? Of course not. Enos heard footsteps on bare planks, receding, then the strangers from farther away. Have you tried this? No, that was her father's monarch voice. It might tell you. No, it stays shut. I don't know how you can resist. Because it causes trouble. My grandfather discovered that. It has not been opened since his time. Then all saw one like it once, the visitor muttered. It stayed shut also, for the same reasons, I suppose. She had no idea what they could be talking about. They seemed to have moved to the far side of the room, near the south window. She strained to hear the voices over the thumping of her own heart. Even if I'm right about you, then there might be hope if we two were to cooperate. No, Sagorn, my friend. I've always refused and I always shall. Even for that, don't think I don't trust you. The stranger, Sagorn, sighed. I know whom you do not trust, and you are right. And you have not told your daughter? Heavens, no, she's only a child. She couldn't handle that. Handle what? Enos wanted to stomp her foot in frustration. But of course she was hardly daring to breathe, let alone stomp. But you will? Another pause. I don't know, her father said softly. If she is older when, or maybe not at all. You must, the stranger spoke in a tone that no one used to a king. You must not let it be lost. His voice reverberated in the empty room. Must? Enos could guess at her father's mocking, quizzical expression. Yes, must. It is too precious. And it is Krasnodar's only hope for survival. You know that. It would also be her greatest danger. Yes, that is true, the stranger admitted. But the advantages of having it outweigh the disadvantages, do they not? And that is our timer. Sounds like our time together is over. I thank you for coming. If you like this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you can hear about any of our new videos. If you think my work is worth monetarily supporting, please join me and become a patron on my Patreon page. Link is below. This is Tarynn, and I hope you all keep reading. Join us next time.